It is Friday, the 23rd of May, 2025, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what's happening in the current political realpolitik situation happening between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Right now, there's a lot of talk in the defense establishment in the U.S. and in Israel about whether or not to strike Iran. And that is happening uh, at the same time as the U.S. is essentially attempting to negotiate with Iran about offering Iran better economic conditions by removing some sanctions if Iran agrees to join another nuclear uh, disestablishment program where Iran would basically agree to not develop nuclear weapons and would, allow international auditors to actually verify better than before that they're not developing nuclear weapons and to limit, if anything, their use of atomic energy to civilian use, if that. Now, here's the thing: the likelihood of those negotiations bearing fruit is really very low. How do we know that? Well, since 1979, 1980, right, when the whole Iranian Revolution took place, the entire country of Iran has been led by one Ayatollah after another, bent on the destruction of Israel and the United States. And part of their plan to do that is to develop nuclear weapons. You have to remember, these are people who are motivated not by economics. I mean, the leader of the country has a lot of money. He doesn't care about the average person there. If anything, he wants the average person there to suffer more so that he can control them more easily. So sanctions do not worry Iran. They still manage to sell a lot of oil and gas to other countries that buy it from them, right? So yeah, does it hurt them? Yeah, it hurts them as a nation, but the leader doesn't care. They still get to develop weapons. They still get to develop arms that they sell to other countries. They still get to develop their nuclear bomb. Nobody's stopping them. So the question is, will Israel strike at their nuclear facilities and slow down their development? Or will the U.S. do it? Or will Israel and the U.S. do a joint strike? Or will they uh, successfully come to an agreement with Iran? Or will they come to a failed agreement and think that they have a good agreement, but actually Iran will just keep developing their nukes covertly as much as they can, and the U.S. and Israel will not strike Iran? Now, of course, we're not talking about bombing areas where there are civilians or anything like that are just going about their lives and not involved in this system. We're talking about targeted strikes on military facilities, nuclear research facilities where they're developing nukes. So, in all likelihood, yes, if those attacks had happened, probably they would happen at night at some point. That's usually when military attacks happen of that nature. And probably it would, you know, harm or end a few people's lives that are working there at night, security guards and whatnot, engineers who are there, doing their thing at night, which is, you know, sad and tragic that those people would be probably losing their lives if they got hit by, if those sites got hit. However, that's part of the risk that these people are taking working in those places. Now, you may say, well, maybe they don't have a choice. Maybe that's the only work they could find. Maybe the government forces them to do that. All those things are potentially true. But the government of Iran is responsible for putting their country in this situation where it may cause Iran or Israel or both, I mean, the US or Israel or both, to strike and hit those targets in order to slow down their advancement towards a nuclear weapon. And why is it important that they don't get a nuclear weapon? Well, because, again, they're not motivated by economics. They're not motivated, like their government is not motivated by economic flourishment and development of the country. They're motivated by what they believe are their orders from God. Right? They're motivated by their interpretation of the Quran, a very Shia interpretation, which commands them as extremists to seek the end of the world, so that everybody can go, all the good Muslims can go to paradise, and everybody else can be their slaves or servants or whatever. And that's their motivation. And it's really hard to negotiate with people who take their commandments from God. They're not likely to listen to reason, which leaves the West in a quandary, because you can't think, Americans tend to think, including the American government, they tend to think, oh, we can apply Western values to these people and they'll be reasonable. Any reasonable person would seek peace. Not the Iranian government. Certainly not their leaders. Right? The Ayatollah and the council that rules him. They want, they want the end of the world. They want the apocalypse. They want Armageddon. That is literally their ambition. So hoping that there won't be a conflict is really putting a Band-Aid on a festering wound. Or it's more like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It's not going to heal it. Right? It's applying at best a temporary stopgap measure if you come to some negotiated settlement about economics and trade. They really don't care about that stuff. At least they've shown no indication to care about stuff. They've shown that they care about their apocalyptic bloodlust dreams of destroying the little devil, little Satan, Israel, as they call it, and then the big Satan, the US, as they call it. So to hope that they somehow will just cast away their motivations that they say they take from God, it's naive at best and completely foolish on the other hand. And it's terribly tragic because it's likely to impact, at a bare minimum, thousands of people, that are involved in the process. It could be more, right? And if God forbid, they actually manage to make an actual nuclear weapon, then it could obviously impact far more than that. Now, I've said for a long time, and I still believe it, even though I know Israel, in theory, has intelligence assets in Iran, in the government or whatever, and so in theory, Israel would know somehow if and when Iran actually managed to develop a nuclear weapon. But they've been months away, so to speak, or a couple of years away for decades. If you think they haven't progressed a couple of years worth in that time, despite all the setbacks they've had, right, all the countermeasures Israel has taken against them and other countries have taken against them over the years, if you think they haven't made a progress, you're kidding yourself. Especially in the last, whatever it is, 6, 7 years, 8 years, since the US pulled out of the last agreement that they had, right? The Six Nations the US, England, France, Germany, whatever, had an agreement with Iran to not develop nuclear weapons, and the US said it's not stringent enough, and Israel urged them to pull out, and the US did in fact pull out. Whether you think that was a good move or not, because now they've been making progress for years without any agreement in place. And they really have no incentive to go back to an agreement with the West. It doesn't matter if you think that it was a sham agreement, you know, it doesn't matter. Like now they've had unrestricted ability to go forward for 6 years, 7 years. And that means they are very likely at the point where they have developed something already. So it's more than a little naive to think that they don't have something. I mean, maybe they don't. Yeah, maybe they haven't yet developed something like a fully capable ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead. Maybe they haven't, but I find that hard to believe. It may not have a significant payload right now. Maybe it's just a very small one, but there isn't much of a leap going from a relatively small payload to a much bigger payload. Right? It's not like once you get the first one done, much easier to scale up. And I just find it very hard to believe that they don't, but maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe they don't have something. Maybe a strike would actually set them back, right? We have to kind of, okay, so the government says that they don't have one, and they're still considering a strike. Well, if they're considering a strike, then they better know that they don't have one, you know, or they better take out whatever capabilities they have, lest the Iranians have one and counterstrike with an actual nuke. Anyway, food for thought. Peace.